Hi, for those of you who do not know me, my name is Ben Brinkerhoff, and I am the campus minister at the Rebels for Christ campus ministry of the Oxford Church of Christ. Nathan has graciously allowed for me to speak to you on this Wednesday night, and I'm really am excited about it. And so before we jump in, and we are going to be looking at Matthew chapter 10, verses 5 really through 16. But before we jump in, I kind of want to give you kind of a disclaimer about this lesson. I am intentionally going to be speaking to the parents of teens. And teens, I hope you are listening in because I think there's going to be a lot for you in here. But I am going to be speaking to parents of teens, and I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of a campus minister. And so I am going to be talking about the transition from the high school years to the college years. Okay? And just one thing in that, it is all about the idea of transition. And so you can almost see, hopefully, this whole lesson as a metaphor for what's happening now. We live in a world of constant transition, right? We live in a world that right now is marked by the COVID-19 virus. And I think actually there's a lot of similarities of what the COVID-19 virus has kind of forced us into and what the college campus forces students into. And by the way, I do want to recognize just one more thing. My experience has been for the most part, actually almost completely on secular state university campuses. My parents were campus ministers. I spent time in Kentucky serving in campus ministry. I served at Oklahoma State campus ministry. Now I'm here in Mississippi. And so that is my experience. But as my mom used to say to parents of students, no matter where your kid goes, whether that be a Christian college, the workforce, or a secular state university, they're going to find what they're looking for. So I think all of this is going to hold true no matter where they end up. But just as social distancing has pushed us out into the world of COVID-19, a brave new world away from our comfortable rhythms of Sunday Bible class and Sunday worship and small groups and Sunday night worship on Sunday night and Wednesday night Bible class, a brave new world where the Christian life can no longer be mistaken for checking a box 4 times a week. So too, the college campus presents incoming freshmen with the challenge of navigating how to live out a Christian life in a brave new world of fresh opportunities and different obstacles and, yes, tons of transition. You see, just as COVID-19 has done for us all, the college campus rips away students' spiritual security blankets. Out on the college campus, an incoming freshman no longer has their youth minister or parent or grandparent or spiritual aunt and uncles. Those security blankets are ripped away. And so I think the text that we're going to be looking at tonight, Matthew chapter 10, which is Jesus commissioning the disciples to the lost sheep of Israel, is extremely important. And here's why I think it's so important. Because it is the first time in the disciples' lives that they're going to have to learn how to follow Jesus by spirit rather than by footstep. Up until this point, the 12 disciples would literally just follow Jesus around. They would just kind of walk around with him from place to place, and they would sleep where he would sleep, and they'd wake up, and they'd walk with him, and then they'd fall back to sleep again, and then just be like, repeat. But for the first time, in Matthew chapter 10, Jesus is going to send them out to do something, and they're going to learn how to follow Jesus out in the real world by spirit rather than by footstep. And think about what that's like and how that compares to a student walking onto the college campus for the first time, where they're going to have to learn how to follow Jesus by spirit rather than following their parent or their youth minister or their grandparent by footstep. And so let's pick up here in verse 5. These 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions. Do not go among the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. As you go, proclaim this message. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Jesus goes on in verse 8 through 15, and he gives advice to heal and travel light and to only stay where welcome. And then we're going to pick back up in verse 16. And Jesus gives his disciples this advice, or this posture for how to live out Christian life out in the real world. I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. So as a campus minister, and when I think about students adjusting to the disruption of their religious rhythms in the brave new world of the college campus, I cannot help but think, what can we learn from Jesus' advice to his disciples as they had to learn how to follow him by spirit rather than by footstep? And Jesus gives us three animals: sheep, snakes, and doves. Jesus says, I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. The pressure of COVID-19 is exposing, I think, many of the fault lines in our lives and opening us up to a plethora of competing stories that are trying to frame and fill and define our very being. I think social distancing is exposing our lonely restlessness, and that financial instability is exposing our misplaced security in our bank and retirement accounts. And the virus itself, in my opinion, is exposing our erroneous invincibility. On top of all that, we're inhabiting this brave new world of 24/7 social and news media where story after story is vying for our attention. And it seems at least that each stance and viewpoint is demanding our allegiance. To orient students to campus ministry and campus life, I often say it's not that campus is bad. In fact, I think campus is quite good, and I really enjoy it when students get involved on campus so they can be a witness, a Christian witness on campus. But we do have to admit that campus is a world of competing stories that are trying to become ultimate in students' lives. You can imagine a student on their first day of class, and they're walking out on a concourse. And they're going to be bombarded by flyers and trinkets and free food for hundreds of different activities that are vying for their attention, and hundreds of different organizations that are going to be vying for their allegiance. And as you imagine that, we have to recognize that the kingdoms of campus, their values and ethics and priorities and the idols that they uplift are at odds with the kingdom of heaven that we as Christians are supposed to be proclaiming to the college campus. The kingdoms of campus that say, if I just had a significant other, my life would be fulfilled. Or if I just had this GPA, I would matter, I would mean something. Or if I just had this resume item, all the doors that I would want unlocked for me would be unlocked. Or if I just had this specific even brand of clothes, I would see myself in a better light, or other people would see myself in a better light. The kingdoms of campus that say, I'm the main character of my story, and you do you at the expense of others, are at odds with the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven that proclaims that Jesus is the Lord over the whole of my life, my major, my love life, my Friday night, and the whole of this campus. That Jesus is the main character of my story, and that sacrificial cruciform love is how we as Christians work. It is our capital. You see, campus ministries, and I think the same is true for churches, are not just some organization. It's not just another organization that is vying for your attention, but rather it is a compass for your attention and a signpost for your allegiance. We are not a Christian bubble, but we are a launch pad as a campus ministry. We are a launch pad out of which you will engage the campus with a Christian world view. But Jesus doesn't just say that we are among wolves, but we are sheep. We are sheep among wolves, and what do sheep do but follow the good shepherd? And so I find myself asking, how are students supposed to navigate a brave new world in which the cracks of their lives are exposed in the midst of transition to a constant stream of stories that are fighting for their attention and allegiance without the practices and rhythms and the people that they had to get them there? Well, we're going to have to be both shrewd and innocent. Parents, you're going to have to model for your kids what it means to be both shrewd and innocent. And if you're like me, you feel like shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves is about the two most opposite things Jesus could say, but he says them in the same breath, and I think we have to take that into account. And as we do, I think in this brave new world, we have to recognize that we actually can't be one without the other. You see, we live in a world of infinite gray. And so we can't maintain a purity of heart without some critical thinking. As Socrates said, and as my dad signed off every single one of his emails, the unexamined life is not worth living. In other words, if you want to live a moral life, a life that's direction is oriented towards God, we're going to have to do some critical thinking. We're going to have to use our brain and cognitive function. We can't be an autopilot. On the other side of the coin, a rule of life that I like to live by is that a pure heart leads to a clear mind, and a deluded heart leads to a deluded mind or a cloudy mind. For example, we have all ourselves, or at least watched a loved one, become illogical because of a lack of purity of intention. If we erroneously think that our glory is greater than God's, right? Or if we irrationally, and we've all done this, if we irrationally make religious activity about ourselves. Or I think we've all at least seen someone who is in sin. And then they spin a web of lies in order to justify to themselves or to others why they're doing what they're doing. Lack of purity of heart leads to a cloudy mind. And so if we want students to be sheep that follow the Good Shepherd in their college years, then parents, we're going to have to model for them what it means to be as shrewd as snakes. My mom always used to tell me, Ben, don't put your brain on a shelf. And it stuck with me. And yes, she did say it quite a lot, but it stuck with me because both her and my dad modeled for me what it looked like to be a thoughtful Christian. A Christian who doesn't just say, well, the Bible means what it says and says what it means, and so just take it for what it is, but rather to probe and question the why behind the what. And that was really transformative for my life. And so parents, you're going to have to stop and think. You can't be on mental autopilot if you don't want your kid to be on mental autopilot as they embark upon their college years. As John G. Stackhouse Jr. puts it, we walk by faith, not by sight, but we must also not precipitously charge forward on the basis of our favorite simplistic principle and superficial reading of the situation. Instead, we must do our part, our cognitive part. We're going to have to use our brains. We're going to have to think critically, as responsibly as we can, and trust God to supervise that process, such that it will bring Christ's command to us in our here and our now. Right now, we are being bombarded 24/7 by stories and viewpoints and opinions, and our regular practice and understanding of church has been completely upended. We have no choice to be an autopilot right now. We've been forced out of it, at least. And as we face these new circumstances, we must be flexible and adaptable and willing to critically think about what it means to follow Christ and proclaim the kingdom of heaven and the current realities of our here and now. And just as that is true, it is true for the college freshmen that they are not going to get by with living off of their parents' or their youth minister's faith as they live out their college years. They're going to have to think critically about new ideas. They're going to have to learn how to embrace new types of people and Christian love, and they're going to have to learn how to discern what it means to proclaim the kingdom of heaven into new and fresh circumstances. And so they also must be as innocent as doves. And we, as mentors and role models, must learn how to model for them what it means to be as innocent as doves. If we want to be sheep that follow the shepherd out in the world of competing stories, we are going to have to pursue a pure heart intentionally. And I use that phrase very intentionally, because I think we often mistake innocence as a lack of something, a lack of taint or contamination or dirt. And I think that's wrong, because I think innocence, rather than being the lack of something, is the presence of an intentional cultivation of purity of heart. In other words, we can't go on moral autopilot either. We can't just have a checklist of things not to do and then consider it taken care of. Rather, we must be intentionally asking ourselves, what am I letting into my heart? Is it defiling it, or is it purifying it? Is it damaging my spirit, or is it bringing me to true and pure and whole life that God intends for me? And are we modeling for our children and our teens how to do that? If we aren't intentional, and if we aren't diligent, these viewpoints and opinions and stories are going to chip away at us, slowly but surely. In our hearts, in our minds, and yes, our purity. As C.S. Lewis put it, it does not matter how small the sins are, provided that their cumulative effect is to edge the man away from the light and out into the nothing. Indeed, the safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signpost. As our students transition into their college years, we need to have compassion on them, and we need to prepare them for it. For they truly are walking out into a world of competing stories. But in that same breath, I do also want to say, I think the opportunity for spiritual formation on a secular state university campus is something that is unique and beautiful. If I didn't believe in it, I wouldn't do it. And so if you have questions, I encourage you to reach out to me. I'll have my email on the screen, my phone number as well. I'd love to answer any questions you might have. And I just want to thank Nathan again for the opportunity for letting me talk to you. If you don't mind, I also, too, would just like to close the prayer for the West Main Church of Christ. And I'm excited about partnering with you further in the future. Now, Father, I praise you and thank you for who you are. For you are good and great, you are merciful and mighty, and Father, you have shown us throughout all of history and through each of our lives individually that you are both willing and able to act on our behalf, Father. And so I pray right now, even in the midst of all the seeming chaos and confusion of life, that you would act on the behalf of the West Main Church of Christ, and specifically their youth group, and specifically the parents and teens who are listening to this right now. That you would cultivate a community that is modeling for their young people what it means to be as shrewd as snakes, as innocent as doves, so that we all may be sheep who follow you out in the real world. I pray all this in your Son's most holy and precious and glorious name. Amen.